Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this live keynote webinar for December 2014. Delighted to welcome you. My name is Fahim Afghan with SCM World. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Peter Carlson, Vice President for Supply Chain at Tesla Motors. Now, Peter has kindly joined us despite an ungodly hour over in China right now. I think it's just gone past midnight your time, Peter, so I think I'll say good morning to you, and thanks for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm pretty okay. Starting to get a little bit tired, but I'm happy to do this.
Well, appreciate you being with us, Peter. We won't work you too hard, that's for sure. And ladies and gentlemen, very excited about Peter joining us today. Tesla Motors is a very exciting brand, and that's what Peter's going to be talking about, actually. He's going to be showcasing the journey that Tesla Motors has been on, as you can see from the title, from startup to brand icon, and really talking about where supply chain fits into this picture and how that has really driven the rapid growth that Tesla Motors as a company has enjoyed these past few years. So we'll have a bit of Q&A dialogue following Peter's presentation. So ladies and gentlemen joining us live, be sure to put forward any questions you have using the questions tab you can see on the top left side of your view as you look at your screen. And I'll be sure in my role, following Peter's material, to put those forward to him and engage in an interactive conversation. But until then, Peter, I will happily hand over to you.
Thank you. So let's get going. This is a story about that started for me about 3.5 years ago when Tesla was contacted me. At that point of time, I was working for NXP Semiconductors, former Philips Semiconductors, as CPO in Singapore. And I had hardly heard of Tesla at that point of time, but I was, during one of my business trips in Silicon Valley, I stopped by, met the management team that our founder Elon Musk had recruited. And I was kind of blown away by the energy, the skill sets of the team that he brought up. And when I then got to try driving some of the prototypes that the team had built up, I was sold. So this is what I'm going to show you today is a little bit of that journey, and also what we are about to do here going forward. But shortly, to give you a little bit of background of Tesla. Tesla was founded 2003, so it's an 11-year-old company. It's Silicon Valley based, and it was founded based on Stanford research on battery power management and electrical drive units. So naturally, based on that, we did not develop our first car ourselves. We actually bought a chassis from Lotus in the UK, brought it over to California, and where we put on a Tesla powertrain, a battery pack and a drive unit, together with us creating a unique carbon fiber chassis on that vehicle that we launched 2008. And we made about 2,500 of the Roadsters, with the primary purpose of really establishing the Tesla brand. Secondly, showing that electrical cars could be something so much more fun and interesting than what has been previously shown. To show that electrical cars could be, fast and they could also have a pretty good range. The Tesla Roadster had about 230 miles range on one charge. One of the important things with the Roadster was that every Roadster that we launched was a connected car. So we collected data about both the battery pack, but also about people's driving behavior when they got into an electric car. and it learned us a lot about those types of behaviors. A lot of people, for example, have a tendency of having a range anxiety when they are about or thinking about electric cars. But the fact is, and what we've seen from our data is that when you start every day with a full tank of gas, which is the reality for most of our customers, they charge the vehicle overnight at home. So they start up in the morning with a full tank of gas, and it's only 2 or 3% of the driving experience where you really need a range extender, where you need to drive longer in a day than what your full tank of gas or full tank of electricity could get you. But it's also the data from these vehicles that have enabled us to feel so confident in the life length of the battery that we, with the Model S, actually gives an 8-year warranty and an unlimited a limited miles warranty on the Model S battery. And the Model S was launched actually the Midsummer Eve. I'm Swedish from origin, and you know, the Swedish Midsummer is a big event. The Midsummer Eve of 2012 was when we launched the first and delivered the first 20 vehicles. It was a big day because it was. It has been a tremendous pressure of the project, given the fact that we had been burning about $100 million per quarter for about 6 consecutive quarters up till then. So that, you know, the stress level was extraordinarily high, and actually the amount of cash at the company at that point of time was fairly limited. So it was a very, very hard deadline to achieve that product launch at that June 22nd in 2012. What was also kind of interesting was that day we also did a webcast on the delivery ceremony, and we had over 1 million viewers before our service system broke down. It is important to mention that the Tesla vision sorry, I have a little bit of cold, but the Tesla vision is not really only about building electric cars. The Tesla vision and mission is around transforming the transportation industry into sustainable practices. And as such, it is, we want to achieve every possible angle to move the needle into making transitions from combustion engines into electrical cars. And thereby we've formed partnerships or alliances both with Toyota and Mercedes-Benz. With Toyota, we have, among others, we've launched an electric RAV4 that we have produced, and we're actually going towards the end of life of that product. And with Daimler, we are right now ramping up a powertrain for their electrical B-Class that is being launched in Europe right now. Both these companies have been very, very important for Tesla. In 2009, we were very, very close to going into bankruptcy. There was no, external funding to be found in the financial markets at that point of time, and it was only with Elon Musk putting in some personal funding, about $30 million from his previous sales of PayPal, together with Toyota and Daimler putting in each around $50 million, that pushed us forward to the point where we later on could go on and develop our own products. So those relationships and those initial investments from the companies have been really important. And it's been pretty good investments for both of these companies. Since 2009, I think both of these investments have returned over 20 times the investment for both companies. As I said, in 2012 was when we launched the Model S, and we got very early a really strong momentum and recognition. There was a couple of things that really made a big difference, especially in North America. The first one being that we won the Car of the Year award. And it was actually the first time in its history where the jury, all jury members had voted on one single car. The second one that really brought a big difference for us was the fact that Consumer Report, which is very influential in the U.S., had the vehicle and gave it the highest rating that they ever given a vehicle. It gave them 99 out of 100, which was also very important for us. The third one was that the U.S. Traffic Safety Authority, NHTSA, in their crash tests of the Model S, gave it a full 5-star. But not only did we have that, several cars have that full 5 stars, but they also have an index where they're kind of calculating the risk of being injured in a vehicle. And with the Model S, we got the lowest index of any car that they've ever tried. I think the second car on that list was the Volvo XC60, if I recall it right. So we got these recognitions, and we got a tremendous momentum actually pretty fast. When we were looking at launching the Model S, we thought that, we could potentially sell something around 20,000 vehicles per year. That was the kind of dimension of the supply chain and the factory that we built up. But it's also important to point out that there was a lot of uncertainty. IHS, which is kind of the big prognosis institute of the automotive industry, they thought that we would sell 3,000 vehicles over its life cycle. So there was also a lot of suppliers who were kind of skeptical about the risk with joining this endeavor. And I can tell you that many suppliers that we contacted at that point of time declined to be part of the project, given the risk. If you look at the product, there's a couple of things that stands out. Probably the biggest and the most unique one is the range of the vehicle, where you with one charge can drive almost 300 miles or a little less than 500 kilometers for 450 or so. And that's been driven by, the secret sauce to that is about 3 things. One being, if you look at the picture here and look at the purple battery, is the sheer size of the battery. Basically, the whole bottom plate of the vehicle is the battery, and you can pretty much only design a vehicle from scratch if you design this battery like it is in the Model S. It contains over 7,000 cells, and with the kind of standard lithium-ion cell technology that we're using, and it gives an 85 kilowatt-hour effect. So it's a huge battery, and Tesla have taken a bit of a different technology roadmap than the rest of the industry. Almost all other electrical vehicles in the automotive industry is using larger cell sizes, and those also have lower energy density. But we've chosen another technology that requires a little bit more of controlling, and so the modules and the controlling system in the batteries is one of the core know-how of Tesla to get that battery pack going. So that's number one. The second part of the range is, if you look at the rear axles, you can see that the drive unit. It's an engine with a green cap on it. That drive unit have an efficiency, meaning its ability to take the electricity from the battery into torque on the rear axle. In most driving user cases, that efficiency is about 85%, which is about 4 times more efficient than any type of combustion engine. As you know, the combustion engine is mostly producing heat to its larger extent, and that is also one of the core reasons why we within Tesla is so convinced that the electric cars and the electric motors are such a much more efficient way of practicing and using transportation than the alternatives. It's also important that this drive unit consists basically of a generator, a rotor and a stator, a gearbox and a drive inverter. And the drive inverter in the Model S, in its design, which is a total Tesla design, is about 30% more efficient than a Toyota Prius equivalent inverter. The third one, if I go back a little bit to the previous picture, is that really impact the range a lot, is the aerodynamics. The Model S is actually has the lowest drag coefficiency of any serial produced car. The CW value is 0.238. And as you can see, there is basically no external antennas. The door handles unfold into the door, and if we would be allowed by NHTSA, we would even remove the side mirrors of the vehicle. But also things like the tires, the wheels, and the braking systems are all designed to minimize drag and optimize rolling efficiency in order to create this range. The other thing that is a bit unique with the vehicle is the whole infotainment system. A very, very clear direction from Elon when we started designing the vehicle was that he was very frustrated that whenever he stepped into a car, he was looking at consumer electronics 5 to 10 years old in the display, etc. So he really, really wanted something totally different. And from his perspective, given an iPhone or an iPad or a smartphone that has all these energy saving constraints, we could, we with our massive battery, we could basically drive this 17-inch display that we have for 6 months without having any energy problems. So from his point of view, we should do something better than what you have in your hands with an Apple or an HP or a Dell product. So when we talked with our suppliers about this, nobody had anything what we wanted in their roadmap. So we were basically had to start from scratch. The benefit being us being in Silicon Valley, we could recruit a whole electrical design engineering team. And we went out pretty much directly to the same supply chain that Apple's and others are using for their display and touchscreen. And we convinced them to jump into this project. Actually, in the infotainment screen, the capacitive touch, when we launched that, was one of the largest applications to date. And the supplier at this point of time, which was also the owner, was a big Tesla fan, had a tremendously low yield. I think when we started production, we had about 15% yield and 85% scrap. And only through the commitment and dedication from the team of the supplier and the owner, they continuously were running to keep us running, and eventually we solved the yield problems. Today, I think we're up in the 90% of yield. But it was a totally different setup than what has been done before. Also on the software side, the whole user interface was built on a Linux platform where you control the entire vehicle through that infotainment screen. Again, every car is 100% connected, and being a connected car is really a big part of the Tesla user experience. I think Tesla is our customers are by far consuming more data than any other car owner as it is today. I can say that the average car in the US and in Europe is consuming more than a gigabyte of data per month, and our users are using that for everything from maps and map tiles and active traffic updates to streaming music and browsing and other functionalities. One of the challenges we have been with pioneering in this area is, while in North America, our owners stay in North America. They hardly go over the border with a car to Mexico, and not that often they go to Canada either. While our car owners in Europe, especially in the August time frame, are going on vacation all over Europe, which have put some challenges when it comes to the roaming costs and managing the roaming in Europe. And we're still working out an optimal strategy there on how to balance the best type of user experience for our customers versus the cost for Tesla running that connectivity. About 2 months ago, we unveiled our first dual motor product, and we thereby also took another step in speed with the P85D, the dual motor car. You are basically able to accelerate 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in about 3.2 seconds, and you reach just above 1G in acceleration. I can tell you that doing that acceleration a couple of times is actually you're really almost starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable when doing it, but it's great fun. What we also did at that point of time was that we're starting to build in the first set of autopilot functionality into the vehicle. So every vehicle that we produce now has a built-in camera, it has built-in radar, ultrasonic sensors, and the vehicles also have both electrical steering as well as braking systems. When you get the car today, you have some of the advanced driver functionality, but what we are also doing is that we're building up more and more functionality based on this hardware. And since we are able to update our vehicles over the air through the connectivity, our customers that buy the vehicle today will actually get more and more features over time. And a bit of the strategy around that is that anything that will make the vehicle safer, that will increase the safety and the security for the driver, we will upgrade for free. And anything that will increase convenience, such as self-parking functionality and other type of convenience features, we will probably charge them a little upgrade fee for establishing. But we're only pretty much, let's say 2 years away from having a hardware that can fully support an autopilot functionality. You need a little bit more development on the radar side. You need more development on the camera side, and not at least, you need more data processing capability. But it's not that far away. And then when the hardware is there, it's going to be about legislation. It's going to be about software development as to see how fast the implementation of autopilot functionality will come. But it's clear, it's very clear to us, and I think it's been proven in several occasions that autopilot functionality will make the roads significantly safer. However, there is also a liability aspect that is going to be a big discussion point, as the liability for an accident to some extent will move from human errors into potentially machine errors. And that's an aspect that the auto industry is discussing heavily today on how to deal with. What we're also working very intensely right now is our next vehicle. This is the Model X, which will be a 7-seater all-wheel drive with a Falcon wing functionality, and we will launch that vehicle in mid next year. So we are in an intense tryout and build up of supply chain functionality as we speak. And it got such an interest at this point of time that we already have over 20,000 reservations of this vehicle. But what is also interesting in a larger perspective, given the vision that we have, is what we call the Gen 3 platform, or the Model 3. And that is really us being able to drive, to build a mid-size sedan and type of BMW 3 Series, Audi A4 type of vehicle in the $35,000 price range. And for many of the what it really means is that we need to take the current bill of material for the Model S, etc., and cut it in half. and for many parts it's possible through changing features and functionality, etc., and working on the materials, and not at least working with volume aspects. But the one thing that is the big challenge is the battery cells and the cost of energy. That needs to go down dramatically in order for us to be able to do a Gen 3 kind of vehicle. And also with the volumes that comes with this vehicle, the capacity of cells in the world needs to go up dramatically. And our solution to that is what we call the Gigafactory. Part of solving the problem with the battery cost is increasing the energy density. Batteries in general, if you take the Moore's law for semiconductors, you can say that batteries have a tendency of increasing 5 to 8% efficiency year by year. And we see that trend continues. So in a 10-year period, you can basically say you can expect that the energy efficiency to double. So that's one part of solving the Model 3. The other part is reaching scale, and you can see on the bars here, you can see basically the world's capacity of the type of cell that we are using for our vehicles. And even at 35,000 vehicles, which is about what we will produce this year, we are starting to take a decent amount of volume. But at the full capacity of the Fremont factory, the factory where we're producing our vehicles, we think that factory could eventually one day produce about 500,000 cars. And at that point of time, we would consume more than the world's production of battery cells. At 500,000, it would represent the black line up beyond. So not only do we have a cost challenge, but we also have a pretty significant supply chain bottleneck in order for the type of growth that we are looking for. So the way that we're approaching about that is to build a Gigafactory, to build the world's largest battery plant. And the cost factor of this we approach by today. Most of the raw materials for the battery cells comes from markets like Australia, China. Some of it even comes from Africa. It's then been brought to Japan, where it's being processed into electrodes, cathodes, anodes, and separators, all consuming a lot of energy. And as you know, in Japan, energy costs after the tsunami and the Fukushima problem have become really, really high. They are then being brought in by into the cell assembly, and then being shipped by boat over to California, where we do modules and we do the entire enclosure. In the Gigafactory concept, we will bring these raw materials primarily from mines in Canada and in the US and Nevada. We'll bring them in by train. And then we will have the raw material suppliers preparing these materials for us in the beginning of the factory. In the middle of the factory, we will have Panasonic providing the cell assembly. And in the end of the factory, we will do the modules and the battery packs. So we'll do a complete vertical integration, and the sheer scale and the vertical integration of this we think is sufficient to create the cost per kilowatt hour that will enable us to build battery packs at the cost supporting the Gen 3 vehicle and really mass market vehicles. So right now we're pouring cement and we're putting up structures for this factory up outside Reno, and it's going to be it's a significant investment. It's about a $5 billion investment into a factory almost 6 million square feet large, and this factory will, when it's up at its full capacity, it will employ about 6,500 people. It's also our intention that through wind and solar we will be really a net zero energy factory, and thereby also supporting the vision of sustainable transportation. Part of the vision and bringing the mission to success is making sure that we are breaking down the barriers for people buying cars. When I joined the company in 2011, we were starting to we were thinking that the superchargers and the fact that you bring a tremendous amount of power up towards 135 kilowatt and up towards 400 amps into a battery would induce a shock to the battery that would have lifelong effects on its durability. But as we've proven out and as we've tried, we can't see that the supercharging is putting any effect on the long-term feasibility of the battery. And that also enabled us to go really, really hard on building out our supercharging infrastructure to support our vehicles. And if you look into the US, this is the plan for the supercharger rollouts. So we're building also these superchargers in our Fremont facility, and right now we're deploying a new supercharging station per day somewhere around the world. And there has already been a number of attempts to drive an electric drive our cars the fastest between coast to coast, and I think the record so far is that this ride have taken about 70 hours from New York to Los Angeles, of which about 13 hours is charging time via the supercharging network. But clearly the objective is that by 2015, 98% of the US should be covered by our supercharging stations. And if you buy the big battery, you will charge for free in the network. This is just some pictures of how the supercharging network looks. And I think it's important to say that we don't see that as proprietary to Tesla. We certainly think that we could collaborate with other car makers going forward around the charging infrastructure. The key thing is the conditions for collaboration is that anybody who use the supercharging network, of course, needs to pay for their share of the electricity, but they also need to charge at full capacity. They can't utilize our charging network at a lower charging rate and thereby take unnecessary capacity out of the network. If we look at Europe, here is the plan for 2014, and as you can see, there is a really large amount of superchargers deployed in Scandinavia. We're selling a tremendous amount of cars there, specifically in Norway. I think we've surpassed over 5,000 vehicles so far in Norway, and during 2014, the Model S has been among one of the most sold cars there. So we have a great market there, but also in the rest of Europe, we are deploying heavily the network. And by next year, we really aim to be able to take our car owners from northern Norway down to southern Portugal on just our supercharging network. This is also us deploying superchargers in where I am right now in China, and we are building out the supercharging network here also to support our customers. And as you can see on the chart, it's just the amount of usage is just growing day by day. Another interesting thing that have come out of this is that when we started to develop the superchargers, our engineers used some of our battery modules from the vehicle and created some storage unit so that for the superchargers, they could take electricity from the grid during the night, when the energy was in many states in the U.S. at half price or significantly rebated, and then storage the energy for using in the supercharging during the day. So as this started as an engineering activity, we then realized that this is a huge opportunity in order to build and support more efficient grid development. So we started to develop a stationary storage business, and right now we're building these commercial units that we're rolling out, for example, to Walmart stores in the U.S., where they are storing battery or energy in the batteries during the night, and they are running their warehouses on these battery units during the day, and reducing the energy costs significantly. This piece of Tesla, we think, can be a really big one going forward, as this is kind of necessary for specifically renewable energy systems, where the energy production is uneven during the day, or whether it's sunny or windy or etc. So it's a very, very interesting development that we are working on right now. On the supply chain side, we are also kind of taking the next step into manufacturing. When we started to build up the manufacturing setup for Model S, around 20,000 vehicles, we chose suppliers basically where they were located, and to some extent, who wanted to work with us and who had the technology. As we are now stepping up the production rates of both Model S as well as Model X, we're kind of taking the next step into the supply chain, and that is what we call establishing a Tesla Supplier Park, which is, I would describe it as a manufacturing hotel, a large location where we invite suppliers in the vicinity of our factory to come and do either full production or part of final assembly, and eventually, as we grow even further, to dedicate their own factories. So we're right now here over the next 12 months working out exactly what type of suppliers, what type of parts, and what types of manufacturing that we are really driving hard to get within an hour's distance from our factory in order to drive the next kind of just-in-time production and reduce the logistics cost, but also to be able to reduce the total carbon footprint impact in the supply chain. And talking about that, when we sell a vehicle specifically to Scandinavia, I think that's a good example. And the reason why I'm saying Scandinavia is because almost all electricity in Norway, for example, is created by hydropower. So from the day the Model S leaves the factory going to Norway, it has pretty much zero carbon footprint impact. And then, of course, it becomes more and more important to look at the life cycle analysis and see how can we reduce the carbon footprint impact in producing the vehicle. So we've started the pilot project, and the intention is to map the entire supply chain on energy use and carbon footprint impact, and really to fully understand where do we have the sources of energy, and how much impact do we have by transportation, raw materials, etc., in order to also re-engineer our supply chains for lower energy and carbon footprint usage. The map you show in front of you is kind of an interesting one. We mapped some of our structural extrusions, and of course the most of the energy consumption in that comes from the raw aluminum production. And we just learned while we were mapping that some of that raw material in the third tier actually comes from an aluminum supplier in the Middle East, where of course the energy use for that ingot supply is being oil based. So that is that was an interesting learning, and that's something that we immediately started to take action on in order to find alternative manufacturing for aluminum where we could go to a hydro or other more efficient energy production mode for the aluminum. The last piece in my presentation on where we are is we're working with a small Silicon Valley kind of startup to develop phone applications where we in our iPhone develop different apps. This one that I'm showing here on the picture is called Transport, and it's basically through an app in my iPhone, I can see every inbound transportation that I have towards our assembly factory in Fremont, and I can see every delay of those inbounds, and I can also then get an understanding of the potential impact by these delays. So the whole purpose of this is, of course, to move the tracking and the control over inventory from kind of min-max levels in our factory out to the pickup points at our suppliers, so that we're really considering all inventory in transit as really viable inventory, and thereby by having full control over the network, we can thereby further reduce the inventory levels in our factories. So this is one of several apps that we are developing together with this factory, and it's been together with this company, and it's been a really good collaboration so far. So that's a short overview of some of the things we've done so far in terms of the journey, the 11-year journey for Tesla, and there's been a tremendous amount of challenging situations for us that we had to overcome in order to get this supply chain to work. And as you know, for me, coming from the consumer electronics world and the semiconductors, perhaps the biggest difference with automotive is the whole logistic aspect, where if you go wrong on logistics, in consumer electronics you can always fly things, but in the world of automotive, it becomes extremely expensive if you have to start putting things on air in order to solve your production. So with that, I'm gonna hand over again to our host, and thank you for your interest and attendance.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate those insights today. We've had a number of questions, so I'm going to get straight to them and remind ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, that now's the time to put forward any questions you have. We do have just under, I'd say, 9 or 8 minutes, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. But let me start, Peter. A question that's coming with such a high level of complexity, technological advancement, and quality assurance in the supply chain, how does Tesla ensure flexibility and competition in its supply base?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've been facing is that the automotive industry is such a big scale manufacturing, and also pretty much every automotive company that is out there is producing over 500,000 up to several million vehicles a year. So it's really a high scale game, and for us to come in with a very tiny production, we had to find alternative ways of being able to be competitive, given the limitations that we had. One piece that we've looked a lot at is the traditional tiers in the automotive industry. As you and many here on the webcast knows, it is a very, very tiered industry where you have integrators and then you have second and third tier suppliers. We've seen that it's been necessary for Tesla to kind of break up some of this tiered structure for several reasons. One is to unlock better costs. The other being that we've needed faster time to implementation and faster time to market, and thereby going through an integrator have been just a too timely experience. So one of the approaches that we've been doing is just to look at the tiered structure and see which ones make sense, and which ones do we think is adding too much cost versus the value add that is being created through that integration.
Thanks, Peter. Staying with your supply base, someone's asked, to what extent are you dependent on key suppliers for your technological innovation, and do you integrate them into your product development process?
Absolutely. You know, we're super dependent on our suppliers for key technical development. One of the benefits that we can offer a supplier is that given our development, our nimbleness, and given our development lead time, we can help them bring new technology to markets in a more limited volume than pretty much anybody else. And many suppliers have kind of responded really well to that. And the fact that, you know, a general designing cycle in the automotive industry could be 4 to 5 years. You know, many times we can bring in an innovation within 12 months into production. That has been one successful recipe for co-development.
Thank you, Peter. And I think I'll make this the last question, just looking at the clock. One person says, what does your manufacturing footprint look like besides the Fremont factory? Do you have any other locations, i.e. Europe? I mean, give us some insight into your manufacturing network.
Yeah, so right now, all our vehicles are being produced in the Fremont facility. What we then have, we have also in Tilburg in Netherlands kind of a final kit facility for the European market. So we're actually sending the vehicles and the drive units and the batteries separate to Netherlands and do the final assembly. But it's important to point out that this is not a full vehicle manufacturing that we only do in Fremont today, and given the capital required to start up an automotive factory, our intention is to build up Fremont to its full capacity, and that's towards 10,000 vehicles per week. Before we then look at making a complete new factory. So the footprint today is Fremont for full vehicle, final assembly in Netherlands, and then of course we're building up the Gigafactory in Nevada to support us with battery packs and enclosures. But we clearly see probably 3-4 years down the road the necessity to build up an equivalent infrastructure, meaning both probably an assembly factory as well as another Gigafactory for batteries in Asia, and a little bit later down the road also in Europe, in order to optimize for the market and regional demand.
Thanks, Peter. And on that note, I know it's almost 1 a.m. your time in Shanghai, so I think I'm going to let you get some rest, maybe get a hot drink to nurse that cold as well. But before I let you do that, I want to thank you once again for your commitment and enthusiasm to share these insights with the SCM World community today. Thank you very much for that. And ladies and gentlemen listening, I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have. Certainly very exciting to have a innovative brand like Tesla Motors join the discussion with us in the community. So I hope you've got plenty out of it as much as I have. And on that note, on behalf of everyone at SCM World, I'd like to wish Peter and the rest of you joining us a wonderful rest of your day. All the very best.
Thank you.